Drafting Archetypes is brought to you by Grey Viking Games. Check them out with our affiliate code link in the description.
Hi everyone, this is Sam Black, continuing my Midnight Hunt stat review with Black. I think Black is very strong. The Black game and hand win rates are less inflated across the board than Blue. The obvious first level interpretation of that is that the Blue cards are better than the Black cards, and I think that there is contextual truth to that. I kind of think, I have a suspicion that what's going on is that the Blue cards line up well against the Black cards, and that a large portion of 17 lands, like premier draft stats, are coming from high-ranked players playing on Arena against other high-ranked players, meaning that they're playing a lot of like blue-black type mirrors and not playing against like green and red as much as people playing at lower ranks or in pod or whatever are or even in best of three are experiencing. Also, the Blue cards might be just like being underrated in a way that makes it easier to like draft Blue and win with it. I kind of think the Black cards overall are stronger, but there's like context that flips it and makes it kind of hard to deduce. Anyway, Black and Blue are both great. I think they're the top two colors pretty indisputably in this set. All right, Diregraph Horde. So I want to take a moment for a big picture thing here, which is to note that, so this is, these stats have changed slightly over the last few days, or the last day or something, in a way that doesn't surprise me. What we're seeing here is the top three creatures, Diregraph Horde, Ecstatic Awakener, and Siege Zombie, have all passed the top three removal spells to penetrate Olivia's Midnight Ambush and Eaten Alive. Previously, some or all of the removal spells were ahead of Siege Zombie. Now Siege Zombie is ahead of the removal spells. I think that's because the fact that there are three relatively hard common removal spells in Black that are all great and all almost exactly as good as each other means that there's such a high density of Black spend a little bit of mana, kill a thing, that every card that is bad against Black spend a little bit of mana, kill a thing, basically gets pushed some portion of the way out of the format, which makes all of the cards that do this worse, and all the cards that are good against this get better, which makes all of these cards worse. So the result of these cards, like, they end up being a victim of their own success. And so then, like, Siege Zombie, which was worse than them before people learned that they need to like account for the Black removal spells in their deck building, ends up passing them because in the new format where people understand the Black removal spells, Siege Zombie plays better. So anyway, Diregraph Horde, very, very high win rate, very, very good Muldrifter. You get a lot of value out of this card, regardless of whether they kill it, and you can use the zombies very well, or it just pushes a ton of damage or whatever. This card is very, very strong. Ecstatic Awakener. I believe that if you are playing Black with white or blue, Ecstatic Awakener is a better card than Diregraph Horde. I think Diregraph Horde is likely better if you are playing with green or red because they don't offer you good things to sacrifice. But I think in the colors that do give you sacrifice fodder, Ecstatic Awakener is actually the best Black common. It really clicked for me when someone compared this to Owlbear, which it's like, this is closer to Owlbear than it is to something like Soul Reaper or whatever. This is less about like being a sack outlet for your stuff and more about being a 4-mana 4/4 that draws a card with very, very little drawback and tons of upside in that it actually costs 1, so you can like attack and block with it as a 1/1, and you can potentially play this, then play another creature, then sack the other creature to this, and have a 4/4 attacking on turn 3 compared to like Owlbear's ability to attack on turn 6. Like that's a big difference. Also, like I played a game where I flooded very, very badly against blue red, but it turns out they just couldn't beat a 4/4. Like if they just the 4/4 lines up. I talked about how with the carriage, the 4/4 dominates the skies. The 4/4 also basically dominates the ground in this format, especially if you're a black deck. There are just so few creatures that you can play that are bigger than a 4/4, and even if you do, the black deck can kill them so easily that the 4/4 just ends up like dominating most of what other people do in a way that forces them to try to double block, which allows you to just like get a ton of value out of your instant speed removal spells, where you kill one of their blockers and like beat them with and like beat their other blocker with the Awakener. Yeah, Ecstatic Awakener is totally fantastic. Might be like merely good in decks that are bad at giving you fodder to sacrifice. Siege Zombie. This thing is just great. It turns all your zombies into like a way to kill your opponent if you can't attack, and the zombies, basically never want to attack. Sometimes there are like whole board stalls. It's not hard to get like 6 creatures and just like dome your opponent for 2 rather than doing nothing because you have this guy. It's kind of just like really important for black to have access to this, especially if you're playing black-red, where it's really important to be able to do damage to your opponent to make your cards work. But most black decks are reasonably likely to find themselves in some kind of board stall where being able to damage your opponent without attacking while being able to block with all of your creatures is just very valuable. Defenestrate, Olivia's Midnight Ambush, and Eaten Alive. These are all the same card. They like people ask like, oh, what's your ranking of these and stuff, and before seeing these stats, it was like, yeah, I bet one of these is better than the other, and I don't know which. Their win rates are really, really comparable. The one that's a sorcery is worse than the one is currently lower than the ones that are instants. It costs less, but it's a sorcery. Being a sorcery sucks. They're like they each have like minor different strengths and weaknesses, but they're all like, you should basically draft them all interchangeably because they're all like worse than the same other cards and better than the same other cards and fundamentally serve the role in your deck of relatively cheap, relatively hard removal. It's probably generally better to have a mix of them than all one or another. And they're like best understood just in terms of like what the existence of all 3 of these together does to the format. Crawl from the Cellar. This is so. This is like a raised dead that gives you value in 2 different ways, right? You get a +1/+1 counter on a zombie, and you get the ability to flash it back. You like the first raised dead is like bad, but really close to not being bad. Like it's not very bad. It's just not giving you enough to be good because it's conditionally spend a mana to get a creature, and you could just play a creature instead, and it's like pretty much the same thing. Here, you spend a mana and you don't just get a creature, you get a creature plus another creature later, plus maybe a counter. I think the counter's a pretty big deal. I think this is way better if you have like a number of zombies, especially zombies that don't only get to do anything once. Really good if you have a bunch of siege zombies in particular. I don't think that this is a priority, but I think that it's a solid card. It actually ends up being fairly similar structurally, power level wise, to consider, though obviously my, discussion about consider being bad in self-mill decks, obviously the complete opposite applies to Crawl from the Cellar. Hobbling Zombie. This is a fine card that it very easily trades and puts you up a zombie. It's in a very similar space to Falcon Abomination, slightly worse because you don't get the zombie right away, and 2/2 flyer is probably a little better than 2/2 Death Touch because the evasion just matters more than Death Touch in a format where people aren't incentivized to play big creatures anyway. But this is fine in that it's generally going to trade slightly up. Bat Whisperer, I've found it to be pretty easy to make the bat, and I've found the bat to be somewhat higher impact than I expected. This card's been fine for me and frustrating when played against me. It doesn't read very well to me. I would say it plays a little bit better than it reads. Not amazing, but I'm not sad to play it. No Way Out. I'll play this if and only if I'm looking for zombies to sacrifice, if I feel like I'm low on that. Interloper, I'm a little surprised by how low this thing's stats are. It's pretty important in black-red or aggressive vampire decks. I guess it lines up poorly against white as a color and doesn't add a lot to the slower black decks. Arrogant Outlaw. This is pretty good if you can reliably trigger it, pretty bad if you ever can't trigger it. So just make sure that your deck is actually very, very good at enabling it if you're going to play it. Certainly no Vampire Spawn. Novice Occultist. This is fodder for the sacrifice decks. But why? You already have infinite fodder in the form of any zombie, and I would rather just play any card that gives me a zombie instead of playing this. So it's usable if your deck needs fodder, but I don't know how you get to that spot. Murkrut Behemoth. I really thought this card would be good since it's so easy to sacrifice a creature and it's so big. But it turns out the thing that I've been saying about how bad Baneslayer is applies just a little bit extra to this thing. It's not good. I thought it would be if I was good at making zombies, but no, just don't put it in your deck. Rotten Reunion. I had a deck where I was looking for the tokens, and I played this, and having just one of it, it was very good. I really did want the tokens for reasons, and it was pretty reliably able to remove relevant cards from my opponent's graveyard. I think that it's more likely that I would want to play this than Novice Occultist or Murkrut Behemoth, even if it has slightly lower win rate. I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that. It's just only very certain decks want it. Shady Traveler, kind of amazed by how bad this thing's stats are. Brimstone Devil read pretty well to me. I expected 2/3 Menace to just be a good stat line in this format. I overestimated it, how much 3 Toughness mattered. Specifically, I thought the fact that zombies existed would make it matter, and in reality, it just doesn't. I do think that turning into the 4/4 has, in my experience, been better than doing 1 damage when you flip back and forth, though that's not always going to be true. Anyway, this is worse than other things you can be doing. I think it's filler. I don't think it's embarrassing, but yeah, it looks like it's better to avoid. Blood Pact, I've already talked about how the format's aggressive and you don't want to spend mana to draw cards. You extra can't afford to spend life to draw cards. Not good. Bladebrand, thought this one might be good because of the ability to attack with a zombie and have your opponent block it and then eat their guy. In reality, attacking with zombies is so bad that anytime you do it, your opponent wonders what's up, and then they usually just don't block and take 2. And You didn't really get them there because you don't really need to work to trade your zombies in for 2 damage. You'll usually find a chance to do that if you want. And so you end up just like attacking with your zombie to try to set up Blade Brand. Your opponent takes it. Now you don't have the zombie to sacrifice later for value, and you didn't get to like use your Blade Brand profitably. So ends up being pretty awkward. Duress is basically never a good card limited. Strixhaven, the closest it would come to being an exception, and even there, it still didn't quite get there. Uncommons. Morbid Opportunist. Amusingly, this does not have a higher game in hand win rate than Organ Hoarder, despite being a complete bomb. This card's really, really, really good. It's absurdly easy to trigger something dies. You just attack with a zombie. Plays really well with removal spells or combat occurring or just playing a game in this format. You really don't have to go out of your way to maximize this. It's just great. Infernal Grasp. I mentioned that you don't want to spend life to draw cards. Spending mana to kill creatures is a whole different thing. You can't afford to spend life to draw cards because you're not affecting the board and you're getting beat up. When you kill a creature, you tend to save life because you're doing it. 2 mana to kill any creature is just like a good rate. This is better than the common removal. Foul Play, a lot more narrow. Sorcery speed only kills some creatures, but value is very important in this format, and the format is more about small creatures than big creatures, so this still kills a lot of things and lets you draw a card while doing it, so quite good. Dreadhound. This is dangerously close to being a Baneslayer. It is a 6-drop, and it does generally want to live, but also it kind of immediately kills your opponent if there's like a number of creatures in play. This is, like very impactful. Vengeful Strangler. Proceed with caution. I've definitely lost to this. It's very good at beating people up. It definitely only plays one way if you don't have a lot of sack outlets for it. It's really, really hard to block this thing and not hate what happened to you. But if you are getting beat up, this is going to feel like a dead card. Blood Tithe Collector. 3/4 flyer for 5 is just like non-embarrassing. Talked about how the Griff that has those stats in white lines up reasonably well against things in this format. Making your opponent discard a card is generally better than eating something in the graveyard, and making them lose life is pretty easy to trigger. So this is like a slightly better Griff, and I mentioned that Griff was like, not something I'm sad to play, so a little better than that. Strumkirk Blood Thief. This gives you a meaningful amount of value if you're doing its thing, but it is a 3-mana 2/2. Fine, nothing special. Baneblade Scoundrel. This reads pretty well if you don't have a lot of familiarity with the format. It's a 4-mana creature with pretty good stats, but it just has all the werewolf problems, and then the general 4-drop problems. This just needs to live to do stuff. It costs too much mana. Covert Cut Purse. A little bit surprised about this card stats being this bad. I've only played it a little, but had good experiences with it. With it only costing 3, I found it pretty easy to attack and have my opponent block and get to trade up. Interesting that I'm saying that, noting that Blade Brand generally doesn't work. It is the case that people can often sniff out like something is up when you make an attack that would make this profitable. That said, like it's not that bad if you don't get value out of it, because the backside gives you value. Like a 2/2 flying death touch is just a pretty real thing. 5's a lot of mana to spend for it. I wouldn't write this card off. Its stats aren't horrible; they are bad. I would conclude from that you shouldn't prioritize it, but I think it's okay to put in a deck. Also, I would note that it's almost certainly considerably overdrafted, so you should not prioritize it as much as most people do. But I think if you get it later than this, it's fine to play it. Heirloom Mirror, sweet looking card, kind of hard to evaluate potentially. In practice, it's really bad. It costs a lot of total mana and life to create a creature that you end up getting completely destroyed if they kill the creature because of all the life and mana you've invested into it. Obviously, you're getting paid for your investment a little bit, where you're getting this loot effect. The biggest problem with this is that it's a horrible top deck. If you draw it late, it doesn't do anything for way too long. You need to like play it early, but if you play it early, you have to like play off curve for the rest of the game to get to the demon. So it's just really, it's not good. It's very bad. You shouldn't put it in your deck. Ghoulish Procession. Note this has an even lower win rate than Heirloom Mirror. This card at least has some dreams with enough synergies. I'm skeptical that it ever gets there. Let's check it. Archetype specific. Ghoulish Procession in white-black improves to still bad. I think that this card is just a little bit too not good. I think when you it's just too slow, too low impact. I think the decks that structurally want it, it's still just not quite good enough. Necrosynthesis, disastrous stats, very, very bad. Avoid. Rares. The Meat Hook Massacre coming in at 67.3%. Even better than everything else we've seen, I think. It's a good one. Why is it? Oh, sorry. I did. This is actually a mythic. I meant to do rares and I did rarity. Sorry. Spoilers. Meat Hook Massacre is a bomb. Rares. Graveyard Trespasser. I talk about how werewolves aren't great in this format, but that's because they die to removal, and when you add your opponent has to discard a card for it to die to removal, it really changes the value equation. Also, it's a 3-mana 3/3. Also, it gives you value up front. Also, it can turn into a 4/4. It's really good. Like, the first time my opponent played this to me, I just I had the same experience that I had the first time I saw Nadar in a game, where it's just like, what's going on with the rate of this card? Like, why does it do all this stuff and have these numbers? It's just not on the same power band as other stuff. Champion of the Perished. You need to actually be about zombies for this, obviously. But if you are, then it's a really good payoff. Jadar, I'm a little surprised that Jadar is as high as it is. It's not at total bomb rate, it's just at good rate. I guess I'm not that surprised. It is pretty good. It gives you this steady stream of things that attack and then your opponent's taking damage or needs to deal with you just suiciding these things you don't care about. Gives you a steady stream of stuff to sacrifice if you have a way to sacrifice it for value. Obviously just very silly if you have the opportunist. Yeah. You know, good card, like just good cheap threat. Bloodline Culling, just a premium removal spell that can also do sweepery type things. Obviously, that's going to have good stats that are mostly just in line with premium removal. Gissa, Glorious Resurrector, good but non-bomb type stats. I think this card is a lot more likely to be overrated than underrated. We see it is very rarely passed, and I think that it has a lot of words that often don't amount to being all that much more than a 4-mana 4/4. It doesn't like give you enough value up front to make up for like how fragile it is. So I'm not saying that it is bad. Obviously, it's a 4-mana 4/4, just not a bomb. Mark of Gristlebrand. Lower stats than Gissa. Its stats put it at solidly not bomb. It was very, very, very good for me the one time I played it in black-white. I wonder if it's better in black-white than other decks. Typically, equipment tends to improve slightly in white. Let's see, black-white, Mask of Gristlebrand goes only up to 58.1%, so a small improvement, but that might just be because white is above average black deck. Yeah, that was only a 0.2% increase. Anyway, it is slow, but it can definitely take over a game. I would, I would be happy to take and play it again, though I don't think it's like a premium bomb or anything. I, generally believe these numbers. With a slate, it's played well for me note. Curse of Leeches. I haven't seen this very much. I've never had the opportunity to take it. My opponent played it once while I was getting like crushed, and it continued to crush me. The stats indicate that it's like pretty good. I would have no reason to doubt them. It's just like, a like rare rate threat. It's better than like unexciting commons, but not really something you should be first picking. Probably generally overrated. Slaughter Specialist. This one is full on trap territory. Actively bad game in hand win rate while basically never getting past. Creatures are too killable to want to give your opponent a 1/1 to potentially get a large creature for 2 mana. Obviously, like, it will win some games sometimes, and when it does, it'll trick the people who are drafting it into maybe drafting it again. But I would say just full on avoid this one. All right. The Meathook Massacre, just stone cold bomb. It is a sweeper that you get to set conditions on. So sometimes it like you have creatures that are bigger than your opponents and it kills their creatures and not yours. And then also it like drains them a bunch. And then also it continues to like give you value as the game goes on. Jaren, Corrupted Bishop, just like transparently good rate creature. I think that you get to make Ormondal extremely rarely, but you get a 2/3 that gives you a token. It's like a good ambush command, or no, Night Squad commando. It's like a good Night Squad commando. You lose life, but you don't have to like do anything to set up making the 1/1. And it also sometimes ends up making more 1/1s and also gives you lifelink to make up for the life. So just just a whole good package that is like not stone cold unbeatable bomb or anything, but mythic that you're happy to first pick. Lord of the Forsaken. This is very much a Baneslayer, but it is a really serious Baneslayer. Also has the like high stat flyer thing that makes it immune to a considerable amount of removal in the format. so pretty good. Tainted Adversary. This is just like the floor here where you just spend 2 mana for a 2/3 Death Touch is just such good rate and limited, and then it just like does the normal adversary stuff. And then this land is randomly sorted into black because it does have black on one side, and it's not good. It's kind of interesting how not good it is, honestly, since it seems like maybe it would be fine if you have like a bunch of zombies, then it's relatively effortless to sack it. So I would certainly not be sure how to evaluate this the first time I saw it. It looks like the answer is that it is mostly a trap. Good to know. Yeah, there are some questions. Like it seems like the opportunity cost on this is pretty low and the potential payoff is pretty high. So there are some questions about whether people like are using it too aggressively, like playing it poorly, sacrificing stuff when they shouldn't, and maybe if you're like very responsible about how you use it, you might be able to like get less punished for putting it in your deck. But I suspect it's still, like given that it goes 1.58 on average, you're just never going to see it late enough that you should consider it, even if it's secretly actually playable if you get it 12th or whatever. All right. So that is the end of black. Assuming that this exists, there's probably another video that you can check out to see red.